thank you for coming back and joining us again. Today I'm going to go over removing the intake manifold and doing the spark plugs on a 3-liter Ford Dura-tech V6. Very common engine, and unfortunately because of the intake manifold design, which is a two-piece manifold, the upper half of the intake manifold has to come off in order to do the spark plugs. So this is of course our Ford Escape, and it's at the mileage now for it to have a set of plugs. So I gotta pull the intake anyway, and I figured it might help someone else out. So that's what we're doing today. So first thing we gotta do is get the air cleaner out of the way. So we'll pull the top cover off. And I'll pull the filter out, which it's probably due for a filter anyway. Oh, yeah, it's due for an air filter anyway. And the next thing we will do is go ahead and remove a few of these baffles and stuff, which, as you can see, that gives us access to the 3 forward spark plugs. But in order to get to the back ones, intake has to come off. So we'll go ahead and unscrew air cleaner fans here. And we will unclip and disconnect the mass airflow sensor. And I'll just tuck it there so it's out of our way. And our air box should just pop up and off. And then what we'll do is down here, we have this style clamp here. So what we have to do with that is push it on. And hold it out. And it'll come off like that. So give me a second here to put this on the bench, and I'll show you how that comes unclipped. Okay, so this hose here, like I said, we push it in, and then you'll see right here, I'm just going to try not to twist it too much, that it has a little tab. So what we do is with it pushed in, we pull this tab up, and that releases the collar, and then the hose slides off. Okay, so with it removed, and I pulled this cover piece off where sort of the intake tube comes in, just so that I had a little more room to work. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to go around the intake manifold, because as you can see there's quite a few hoses and wires that plug into it, and I'm just going to disconnect all of those. Now, most of these will sort of lay where they belong anyway, so we don't need to worry too much about remembering where they go. And as it is, a lot of them will have a style of connector that'll be sort of singular, so it's only going to fit that one particular part, whether it be throttle control on the side here or EGR on the back or anything like that. So if you do, for whatever reason, forget, you get busy, you have to go do something else, you should be able to put it back together with sort of the process of elimination. Okay. We need some pliers. So I'll go ahead and pull those off. If you don't have a set of pliers like these, you can grind a little slot in here on yours if you do a lot of hose clamps. They're kind of neat. I these quite a while ago. This allows you to actually hang on to these clips. The problem is the clips stick to the hose. Okay, so for this connector here, what I do is, and it's kind of hard to show, so what I'll do is I'll show you it when I take it off again, just to make sure. I take a pick, right? Pair of needle nose pliers. I come down in behind it, and you'll see 2 white tabs. So I take my needle nose and I put them over the ends of those tabs like that. They squeeze in. I take my pick underneath and I pull out. And that is that clip released. And then that is the hose off. So I'll show you what I was talking about for the 2 clips. So on the back side of it here, you'll see that if I push this through, there'll be 2 little ears. So we push those in, we put something on the front to pry it out. And that's how we disconnect that properly. That way it does not get damaged. So while I have you on this side of the engine, oops, the other thing that we have to take off here, and I apologize, camera's gonna have to go sideways here. So you'll see down the side of the intake manifold, there is a steel bracket. Okay, we'll just do a little exploration here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, you see this steel bracket down here on the side of the intake that gets bolted back to the back of the cylinder head? We have to go ahead and unbolt that from the intake, because that's what holds and supports the end of the intake. And what the other thing we need to do is go ahead and unbolt the EGR valve over back here as well. And they're both 8mm. So we'll go ahead and I'll get that stuff off. And then the next thing we can do from there, this hose will have to get slid back. I've already disconnected the sensor up top here, which is your manifold absolute pressure sensor. And I've already gone ahead and unclipped these 2 wires back here as well. So I'll go ahead, I'll take that EGR bracket and valve off, and I'll go ahead and take that bracket off down there. Bracket off, which I'll show you what the bracket looks like here. So we're going to do this without dropping the bolts. So here's what the bracket actually looks like, right? So these 2 parts go into the plastic intake manifold, and this one goes on the back of the cylinder head, right? So when you get that far, that's what that looks like. So with that off, the next thing to do is to loosen off the bolts that hold the intake manifold. Loosen off the intake manifold now. And what we're going to do is we're going to work our way across. So there's going to be a grand total here of 2, 4, 6, 7. So work our way from the middle out. So we're going to start by cracking this one loose. And we're going to work our way to here. And we're going to come over here. Loosen this one off. What we're trying to prevent doing is stress loading it. I come over here, we'll do this one. We'll come back down here. Take this one off. Well, we'll loosen it anyway. And we'll come back down this end. And do this one. And finally we'll come back to this one here. And we'll repeat until they are completely loose all the way around. That one's loose. This one's still got a ways to go. But there's no stress or tension on the intake manifold now. Okay. Okay, so with everything unbolted now, the only other thing I did go back and do was I took the two 10 millimeters out of the EGR valve here, so we have a little more room to work. And with that undone, that's our upper intake manifold off. All right. So with that off, we now have complete access to all 6 spark plugs. These 3 guys and those 3 guys. So let me point out a couple of the things that we couldn't really see in the video. All right, so I showed you these 3 being disconnected. I mentioned this and showed it, I think, being disconnected. All right. Back here, I had to disconnect this clip, and there's a white clip here that's on that one. Now this one broke, so I'll have to replace it. I have some of these cable tie clips. This one came out okay though. And that was everything we took off in the back. Now, I ended up, originally I took the 2 bolts out of the back of the other section of the EGR here. The ones you want to take out are these 2 10 millimeters that go in the back of the EGR valve like this and come through. Those are the 2 that hold it onto the intake. That was my fault. Anyway, so now with that off, we now have room to work. Okay, so with everything unbolted and unplugged and what have you here, this is what it looks like. Across the front here is 4, 5, and 6. And in the back we have, of course, 1, 2, and 3. So the coil packs themselves, we quite literally just pop out now. So start number 4 because it's right here looking at me. Just pull it up and out. Okay, so we'll pull this one out. I just have a very old snap-on swivel spark plug socket that I like using, but it's just a 5/8. Funny story about that socket, but I actually found it in the engine bay of a truck I was working on. So I have no idea how long it had been there, but the truck was a 1995 Ford F-150 with a 302 in it. So I'll go ahead and... Anyway, so I ended up with what is one of the handiest little sockets I ever had. Okay, so I didn't bother to film the other part of it, but just because redundancy. So the plugs I'm putting in are the Auto-lite Platinum. They're AP103 if you want the part number. I could have got the Motorcraft plugs, the same ones that were in it, but at the end of the day, these are pretty much exactly equivalent in terms of heat range and everything. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish up number 6 plug here. Now there is torque specs for both the coil pack bolts and the spark plugs. However, it's up to you. I'm not saying don't torque them. I'm just saying personally, I've always just put them to snug. That's what I do, but again, it's up to you. So that's snug, and we'll go ahead and pull our tool back out, and we'll grab our number 6 coil pack, and we'll go ahead and drop it down in, and we'll just make sure it's seated all the way, and I'll grab the bolt, and I'll put it in, that's the sound of it seating all the way down. Take our quarter drive ratchet with an 8mm. Again, we'll just snug it up. We'll plug that back in. And you'll hear a snap here. There we go. And that's plugged back on. So now, the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and clean up our gasket mating surfaces of the lower intake manifold here. And we'll remove the old gasket from the, So we'll clean these gasket surfaces here. And we'll remove the remainder of this gasket on the back of the EGR valve. And we will go ahead and prepare to put the intake back on. Oops, sorry. Okay, so on the intake itself, we'll go ahead and we're going to remove that one, the old gasket. But there it is, MS97194 if you want to buy an aftermarket set. I don't know what the part number is directly from Ford. I've always had okay luck with Fel-Pro gaskets, so it's one of those things where for a gasket I'm not too worried about using an aftermarket part as opposed to OEM. So just like the original, it's a one piece also. So we can remove the original, which I just usually use a pick. I'll get under one corner of it and just kind of lift it out if I can. Apologize if my arm's in the way you're seeing. It's just kind of a two-handed job. So if you get a hold of it in one spot like this, and you get your finger under it, then you can kind of lift out the old gaskets. See, we're not going to reuse these because what happens is over time the rubber starts getting hard. These ones are still kind of flexible, but it's not worth taking a chance. So in the garbage they go. We're going to take our new gasket and we're simply going to lace it back in where the other one was. So it just goes inside the same grooves, and that's how that works. And just like that, our new gasket's on. Okay, now for the fun part. Everything we just did, we get to do in reverse. So we have our intake manifold. So now we'll bring it over here and we're going to try and lace all this wiring and everything back in it again. And we're also going to have to try and get the hoses lined up. So I'll bring our wires back around through here, all three of them. There's two. Bring our third wire down and around here. And up. Okay. Now, there we go. The intake's sitting on. So what I'm going to do with them is, for the intake bolts, I'm just going to wind them down just a little bit. Just enough that they're started, because there's a torque sequence with these. So we're just going to go down a little bit like this. That's plenty. It's just so that we don't have to take and wind the ratchet a million times, because there is a torque sequence, and I'll go ahead and show you it in a second here. And it is important, because what's going to happen is we're going to try and equally distribute the load across the intake manifold. So like I said, for now I'm just going to bring them down just till they're snug-ish. They're not even snug, just closer to being snug. Okay, so now comes the important part. Hopefully this is going to show up good. That is the torque sequence. Directly from Ford Motor Company. As you can see, the numbers are the sequence in which you tighten them. And they are tightened to 89 inch-pounds plus 45 degrees. So what we'll do is we'll take the torque wrench, we'll set it to 89, we will torque them all in sequence, and then we will apply an additional 45 degrees using a torque angle gauge. So we'll get our torque wrench set up here. Okay, hopefully this turns out okay because I've had to zoom in quite a bit. But what I usually do is I hold everything steady here. Now you can watch our dial. Okay, there's 30, there's 40, there's 45 degrees. So that's that one done. So we just do our last one, which, give me a second here, will be that one right there. So what we'll do is we'll bring this over, same deal, we'll get it so it's set up, we'll zero it, take and zero it here. Okay. There we go. 30, 40, 45. And that's our intake torqued. Okay, so from here what I'll probably do is speed the video up because at this point all we are doing is doing everything we did in the first portion of it except in reverse. At this point we are just putting everything back on. So if you have any issues at this point, refer back to the first half of the video when we took it apart, and that'll give you the answers.